Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. Welcome back and Happy New Year. We are here with our leadership guru, Tony Marolt, joining us once again. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing great, Jill. How about yourself?
I
hope you had a nice holiday and look forward to working with you in the new year here.
Ditto, ditto, ditto. Same here. Thank you so much. Pleasure to see you, have you back as well. Hope you had a happy and healthy new year, and we're off to a good start. For those that may not know Tony Marolt, well, it's a shame. He's been hasn't been with us for a few weeks, but just a reminder, and of course, there's new listeners. Tell us a little bit about what you do, Tony.
Sure. So my name is Tony Marolt, and I have been a student of leadership probably since 11 years old when I started scouting program. But I went to the United States Naval Academy and did 9 years after that in the Navy. And then I did 25 years at Hallmark Cards, which is a Fortune 500 company at one point. And just did everything, almost everything in the supply chain, and then switched over to information technology. And when I parted ways with Hallmark, I started my own company, which is Lead Left, Grow Right. And Lead Left, Grow Right, all one word.com is the website you can contact me at, or you can call me at 816-694-4656.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for being here, for joining us again. And I know you kind of wanted to do a little leadership potpourri. We'll start there, right?
Right.
What is the difference, would you say, between management and leadership to begin with?
So I put this one in here specifically because the question comes up all of the time. We could probably talk for hours about it. If you had a panel of leadership folks, they could probably talk for days about it. But a couple of things that I pulled out since we don't have a lot of time, but a great quote from a friend of mine when I worked at Hallmark named Gerald Hoffman. He said, management deals with stuff, leadership deals with people. And I thought that was so great. You still need to be able to be a manager if you're a leader, but when you're doing that function, you're dealing with stuff. And quite often the stuff that you're dealing with is trying to get things moving along, achieve objectives, but you're doing the stuff side. If you have someone on a team who maybe isn't performing, but perhaps they have some personal issues going on, then it's time to have a conversation. And as a leader, I would hope you would know about those things. And that's when you get into the people part of it, to see what you can do to help them stay on task and stay motivated despite having personal issues at work. So that's the first thing that I might offer up. What did you think of that? Does that make sense?
For someone, again, leadership in general, I know you're dealing with a lot of corporations and individuals, but leadership to me, you've also given me a whole nother insight as to what it's like to be a leader in the workforce, and brought me back to many times where I was in the newsroom and being led or supposedly led by certain people and their skill. But because there's a difference there. I mean, there is, and good leaders are not good managers. Managers are not always good leaders.
Exactly.
But I'm glad you pointed out both for us all, because it could be a little confusing. But you're right.
Yeah. So in terms of leaders versus managers, if you were just to guess on the percentages in your own career, would it be 80% were managers and 20% were leaders?
Absolutely.
On top of them?
That's about it. Yep.
Yeah. And that's part of why I have felt so passionately as I got into corporate America and even beyond, just reading stuff in the news. It's very clear that we do have some, the 80-20 rule does apply in so many situations, but thank you for validating that for me, because unfortunately, we want to make that percentage shift, whether it's through my book or through these dialogues that we're having together. The goal is to move that percentage. Even if we move it 5%, that would be a huge win. And it's a win for everybody. It's a win for people that can become great leaders. And right now they're just practicing management skills, but it's also a win for the people underneath them because we all want to work for a leader. Most of us don't really want to work for a manager unless we absolutely have to. So,
Wow. Okay, got it. Wow. All right. So let's continue on.
uh,
Like you were saying, how many people lead at a minimum and why is that important? And again, leadership, why would you say vision's important?
um, let's go back just a little bit. I had a couple more things on the management and leadership, and then we'll get to those. Um, General and President Dwight D. Eisenhower, his quote was, "Leadership is when other people do what you want them to do." And here's the important part: do what you want them to do because they want to do it. And it's sort of like we just talked about with your experiences and my experiences. A manager, you're just doing it because you were told to do it, not because you necessarily wanted to do that. So I thought that was great and a nice compliment to what Lao Tzu said, which I've used in my book about, a great leader essentially is one who teaches and trains people, and in the end, they can stand back and let the people do the work themselves. Um, and then in management, there's this principle called SMART, which is about achieving objectives in a certain time frame, etc. That comes from management as opposed to leadership, and it's not inherently bad. It's good to have goals and objectives. It's good to identify them very specifically, but it can be overused in performance reviews by management. So the SMART objectives um, need to be worked on and worked out with and achieved with the help of leadership skills on top of that. And so that's just a little bit on management versus leadership, but let's get to some of the questions you asked about. So some people think I say this as a joke, but how many people do you lead at a minimum and why is that important, you asked? This is one of my Tonyisms. At a minimum, I say you're always leading three people. Who are those three people?
Hmm. Well, I have kids, so I'm leading them. Different, but you got to ask yourself. Okay, got it.
so, so the three I say is me, myself, and I,
Yep.
right? And that's what it feels like sometimes, especially if you have kids or grandkids or a team of other people. Um, it's me, myself, and I, because you got to have one of those people motivating you, one working on the management side and one working on the leadership side. And we'll get to that in a second where I can bring out some scientific facts about how we think and how we talk, etc. So I say that, but just with tongue in cheek because it's really real if you think about that. We're not singular individuals. We all have multiple parts to us.
Right.
And and then you asked about vision. So for leaders, um, you'll see in most of the leadership books about establishing a vision. And that can be everything from a Steve Jobs establishing a vision for his company. And here's where we want to go, folks, or Bill Gates. Those are people that we think of as visionaries. But a vision itself at any level is really just about here's a place where I see far off, and here's where we want to go. And we may not get there, but we're sure going to try because that's the vision that I have for this group of people or this company or this department or whatever subset you want to use. And the vision has to be something. This is not a management thing when you have vision. So a vision has to be crafted so that we get to that earlier comment about from Eisenhower about people will want to do, they will want to work alongside you to get to the end goal, end state of that vision. So it's a critical component, and you can see how some of these things start linking together. Even though I call this potpourri for this particular session, pulling out and teasing out some different things in the leadership quotient as well as just in my own leadership background. But they all start linking and coexisting together. So I guess one of my questions, and then we'll continue on with vision, for you, Jill, is how many folks that you worked for really had a vision that was compelling for you, and that you wanted to follow them and achieve that particular vision?
Not many. Not many. Maybe one or two people. Not, yeah, no.
did did those one or two people, did they articulate it?
Yes. Oh, they're very thorough, very straightforward, very approachable, very kind.
Yep.
Yeah, a visionary to
Yep.
me is someone who is on your level, who can speak to you and to explain it and yeah, make things happen. But yeah,
Yeah.
not too many, believe it or not.
No.
What about
Well, unfortunately, I believe that a whole lot,
hmm
um, but you hit on a really important phrase, and I think, uh, to me, it just triggered this thought of, people that can speak to you at your level. That is exactly what differs quite often a manager versus a visionary,
hmm
because the visionaries do have they have to have this capacity to get people at all levels. So whatever they say can't just you can bring the whole company together, for instance, in a giant ballroom. Let's say there's 1,000 people in this company, and you can have a really good speech, but it's only as good as how it gets to those individual people's people. So if they're giving it to the whole company, but really it's mostly directed to the senior leadership team that works for them, well, then people like you and I sitting in the audience may say, we're going to tune it out after just a
Yeah,
few
of
minutes.
course.
So thank you for that. That's a really critical phrase, at your level, and they speak to you. Um, I always, because I was in the Navy for so long, I use a lot of metaphors from the Navy, but um, to me, a leader keeps the ship on course. First of all, they have to say where we're going, right? Okay, we're going to sail to the Bermudas. Okay, well, there has to be a course set in and all kinds of plans made, etc. But they are the ones that steer the ship correctly towards, and they don't do it themselves. They have others actually driving the ship, but they have to go through calm seas and troubled waters. That's when a leader has to go up to the person driving and say, "Hey, you got this," or the people that are running the engines. Hey, we need them now more than ever, because we've really got rough seas out there. We have to keep everybody safe. So, um, the helmsman, the engineering people, and in order to do that, you have to train people and be flexible, because that trip to Bermuda,
Yep.
the further you are away from Bermuda, the more challenges you're likely to encounter. If you're sailing from Norway to Bermuda, that's a whole different proposition than if you're sailing from Miami to Bermuda. Just a longer distance, more things to happen. And so that training and flexibility, that is something that you influence as a leader, right?
Yeah.
So, and leaders also, in that example, um, they are the rudder. And
hmm
the rudder is that part of the ship, right, that controls whether it goes left, right, or straight ahead or
Yep.
something in between. So leaders have to know when to course correct, how to keep that rudder from staying, or keep that rudder staying true and on the course. So does that make sense?
hmm Just remind everyone how we could reach you.
You can email me at Tony.Marolt, first and last name, Tony.Marolt@gmail.com. You can reach out to me through the website, leadleftgrowright.com. And on there, there's going to be a contact link, and you can just send it to me. It'll come shooting right through me to email. Or you can call me at 816-694-4656.
Perfect. Thank you so much. All right, on continuing our leadership, I know there's still a lot more to get to, and of course, the time always goes so slow. Leadership is not about being the best. Leadership is about making everyone else better. I like that post that I read in your notes.
Yep.
Do you want to give us some examples about, why, how many people do you lead in a minimum, why you think it's important?
Um, so we covered that a little bit earlier when we talked about me, myself, and I.
Why?
But let's get into. I said I'd eventually connect some of these things. So let's take that discussion and remember it, because me, myself, and I. And then I'm going to throw some things at you. The first is a quote behind me. I have to move my bald head a little bit the other way. And this is from Fierce Conversations and a lady named Susan Scott. And this lady, if you haven't read Fierce Conversation, to me, this is a must read for every single leader. Should be for college students, high school students. I have this thing tabbed, and I've read it at least 6 times, several times with groups that I've been. We've gone through chapter by chapter. It's that important to me and the lessons that are in there. But one thing she says is, all conversations are with myself. Sometimes I let others in. All conversations are with myself. Sometimes I let others in. And that gets into the me, myself, and I. We are, when people say, oh, I don't talk to myself. Well, we all talk to ourselves. There's not a person alive who doesn't talk to themselves. The
Mm-hmm.
difference is sometimes you talk out loud, and that's usually what people are referring to. But we are all having conversations inside. Even right now, as you are interviewing me for the Zoomcast, there's a part of you that, depending on what is laid out for your day, oh yeah, I got to remember to pick up Jack at 5 o'clock, or oh, yeah, I was just thinking, I'm trying to concentrate on Tony, but man, we don't have any milk in the house, so I'm going to have to get some milk. And some people will say, well, that means you're not a good listener. If you want to be a perfect listener, then you can turn that off. And some people do have that capability. But for most of us, we've got several thoughts going on in our head, and we can dart from one subject to the other. And it just depends individually on what your personality is and what kinds of stressors are in your life, et cetera, et cetera. So when I said me, myself, and I before, that's a fundamental piece of this is we're always having conversations with ourselves. A lot of that is internally. And so when we let others in, as Susan says, then we have to focus from, if we're just off in a corner, just saying, okay, I'm just going to think about stuff today, and take an hour out. Different than when you're talking with people. So here's the difference. And there's a guy named Brian Tracy, who's a psychologist and studied a lot of really good on just about everything with the human psyche and how things work, but he has a lot of science-based things in there. And I read through this entire disc series. It was 6 of them, and one thing, there are many things that I copied from it to use, but one of them is our brains, and think about this, our brains operate somewhere in the neighborhood of 400 to 500 words a minute. That's how fast we're thinking.
Mm-hmm.
But we only speak at about 145 to 160 words a minute.
Yeah.
So if you subtract that out while you're speaking, so while you and I are engaging, there are, 300 plus words per minute that can go on up here in the old brain. And that's why we have this internal clock, or not clock, but conversation going on with ourselves. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why when we listen to each other, if we don't have our full attention,
Bam.
and over the course of our time, there's been times when like, oh,
Oh,
can you help me out with that again, Jill? Or Jill, Tony, can you expand on this again because I didn't quite catch it? That's that whole thing in motion because it's very difficult to keep everything. So, just our podcasting thing where we're looking at, okay, is
yeah.
the Zoom thing working or not?
Not the communication issues. I know it's so hard.
Yeah. So if me, myself, and I, that 400 to 500 words a minute to me was astounding. But it, and as an introvert, I have lots of conversations with
Mm-hmm.
myself, lots of them, right? We're very head focused in a lot of ways. So as a professional, that kind of uses an example for you. So I am a professional speaker and podcast host, and I speak at approximately 145 to 160 words per minute. There are other sources that state the average American English speaker engaged in friendly conversation at a rate of about 110 to 150 words per minute. So a little bit less, but the point, if the second one's right, then we have even more words per minute running around in our head. So conversation, it's difficult. You'll see this a lot of times at parties, right, where you're just doing the surfacey talk to enjoy yourself, and some people are better at it than others. But it's typically you're not talking way to the world kinds of things, right? You have a drink in your hand, or you're at the bar and you lean over to the next person, or a server comes by and you grab something. Well, you're listening to that person, but you may not be listening as intently, because especially if you're at a party with either people in your company or you're at a conference, you're looking around while you're talking to this person. You're seeing what people, what they're wearing. If you're at a company party, you may be saying, "Oh, that's right. I need to talk to John. He's the CFO, and I need to find a way to approach him. Let me see if I can go over there." So you're thinking about other stuff, even though we may be having a conversation. So it's a lot more lighthearted. So does that kind of blow your mind a little bit?
It does blow my mind. And unfortunately, I wanted to also, and not unfortunately, fortunately, I just want to remind everyone how we can get in touch with you. Leadership.
Yeah, leadleftgrowright.com,
Uh-huh.
tony.marolt@gmail.com,
And
or
your books. Where do we find
the
those?
the leadership quotient, and that can be found on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. And I would get the Westwood Books edition. I've published it previously under Page Publishing, but that will has a few other things in it. So thank you so much, and I think these conversations are going to continue into the new year, from my understanding. So I really look forward to talking with you. Hopefully, it'll be a little more routine
And
than what we had.
good. And any advice to leave us off with today?
Um, I guess the advice I would say, of all the things we talked about, is understanding the differences between leadership and management, and that one's focused on stuff and the other's on people.
Uh-huh.
Think about that in view of your conversations, and as we talked about, what's up in your brain versus what you're speaking, and try to, instead of speaking in management, try to speak as a leader at every opportunity that you can.
Got it. Well, thank you so much for being here, for joining us and occupying space as always. And I hope you have a fantastic day, Tony. And looking
Thanks,
forward to
Jill.
the next time we connect. Thank you. And
All
to all
right.
our listeners, stay tuned. More of the show's coming right up after the break.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.